Hi, welcome to Scholarhat YouTube channel. So here you are going to learn about everything about React. So we will start with React components, JSX syntax. Further we will learn about the hooks because hooks is the now latest trend to work with the React JS. Then you will learn about the React state and the props, data binding, routing, lifecycle, how we can create the forms in the React JS with the help of Formic and other library. Further, you will learn about how to apply the validation. Everything you are going to learn about in this complete React JS course. If you're coming to the channel first time, I request you to please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon so that the information about such valuable courses you will get notified. So let's get started with the course. So let me start with the React. So when it is coming to the React, so React is a JavaScript library for creating the user interfaces. It is developed at Facebook to build the interactive, stateful, and reusable UI components. And the React.js is not only limited to building the website, it can be used to build the desktop application, cross-platform native mobile application, and single-page application. And the React.js is mainly known for the speed, simplicity, and scalability. Because it's a library, it's not a full-fledged framework. So it is providing the limited set of functionality. Sometimes the people compare the React with Angular. So Angular is a full-fledged framework which is offering to you everything to build the end-to-end application. But React is a library which is providing you the limited set of features. So we don't have the built-in support here for routing, for validation. If you need such things, we need to add the others React.js supporting library. This is a React.js version history we having. So first time it was introduced in 2013, and initially they came with minor release. You can see it is starting from 0.3.0. Then we having in February till February 2014 we having the 0.12. Then in 15 we having 0.14. But starting from the 2016 they switched the framework from minor release to major release, because minor release sometimes having a sense this framework is still in preview release, it's not ready for the development. But this is not the right things, it is ready for the production one. So that's why the team decided to switch to the major release, not to the minor one. So then we having React 16, React 17. So latest version we having the React 18. It was released in March 2022 itself. So we'll see here every 2 years, even sometimes in 1 year itself, you will have the new version of React.js. But React is quite stable. We don't have the breaking changes here. And obviously you will have the next release of React. It might be next year, it might be after 2 years, depending upon the plan. So the React advantages are it's easy to learn and easy to use because you have to just focus on the JavaScript style. It's having the virtual DOM that is actually fast in case of manipulation. There is a unidirectional data binding. We having the client side and server side rendering. We having the reusable and interactive components. We having the many developer tools to get started with the React.js. React.js also having a good ecosystem. And these are the companies are using the React.js. So React.js is widely used by the Fortune 500 companies in the world to build their own product. So many products are based upon the React.js. So when it is coming the MS Office 365, it is completely based upon the React.js, Skype, Twitter mobile app, Instagram, PayPal, Netflix. So these all are using the React. So when it is coming to the React.js ecosystem, we having NPM, Node.js, Babel, React Router, Redux, ES6, Webpack, and many others we have. So to get started with the React, we need the React CLI so that we can create the React application. So when you will look at the React.js created code, you will find out two library there, React core library and the React DOM library. So React core library providing us the React library core features. And React DOM library is providing the features especially for browser. So it provide the various methods which we can use with the browser. Similarly, we having the React Native as well. So in the React Native, they have designed the thing specific to the mobile application. So React DOM for browser, React Native for the mobile application we having. And the React.js, you will find out we having a strict tag at the app.js where we wrapping the things. So this strict mode of the React.js is going to force us to follow the recommended practices of the React library. Even it verify whether the methods are deprecated, which are not going to be used, so that we can prevent the side effect of the code. Because sometimes you might be referring some blog, some articles over the Stack Overflow, and you have copied the code which might not be the recommended as per the React.js latest release. So in that case, React, this strict mode help us to identify that one. So these are the React application building blocks. So we having the JSX, transpiler, virtual DOM, components, props, states, ref, data mining, events, hooks, component lifecycle, router, forms, validation. So these are the many things are going to be the part of a React application. So all the things we will do here one by one. So when it is coming to the transpiler, so we having here two transpiler mainly, Webpack and Babel. So what are the code we are writing in the JSX and even in the ES6 that is going to be converted to the ES5 so that our application will render in the older version of browser as well. So this is the way how the complete flow is happening. This is my EX6 code and what are the code I'm writing in the JSX. Through the Webpack and Babel, it is going to transpile into the ES5 because ES5 is widely supported in the older version of browser as well. So this is the way how the things are happening here internally. So when it is coming to the what is the role of the Webpack? So role of the Webpack is it is actually a build system for the React.js application. It is just going to create a bundle of multiple JavaScript file into the one file. What are the CSS file we having? It is going to club them into the bundles. So as we having the MS build in the .NET, as we having the other build system, similarly we having the Webpack. So Webpack is helping us to create the build of our React.js application with all the necessary dependency we are using in our application. So here using the Webpack, we are going to create the bundle of JavaScript, CSS, and the images. So Webpack is already configured as a part of the React CLI. We don't need to set up it explicitly. So if you look at the code, we have here packet.json file. So what is the role of this packet.json file? So whenever you are dealing with the Node.js, especially the npmjs.com. So Node.js use a package.json file because here we are using the Node.js application structure. And you can say we are using here the node modules. So to play with the node modules, to download, to upgrade, we need this packet.json file. So in the packet.json file, we define the application name, version number. Then we define the dependencies which our application are using. So mainly we having the two types of dependencies, production dependency and the dev dependency. So this is the option we having for production dependency, and it will let us know which version of library we are using. So we are using here React 18.1. So you can see we having here mainly here two library, React and React DOM. So React DOM we are using here, it's a web application. If you build a mobile application, would be here a React native. Then we having the React script. So React script is similar to we having the running the React.js script. You can say React script start, React script build. So this is helping us to build the React application, run the React application. So it is happening because of this React script. So these are the option to run the application, build the application code with the help of React script. And we having the other settings here related to the ECMAScript setting, browser list over there, for the element over there, which version of Chrome and Firefox we are supporting here. You will find out here there is a one more package file that is packaged as log file. So what is happening here today, we are using React.js 18.1. But obviously after 6 months, this version will change. So or after 1 year, 2 years, this version will change. So whatever the setup we have done today, the same setup if you will try to do after 1 year, 2 year, so there should not be any breaking change. So in that case, somewhere we need to store the exact version of the library. So this package dash log file is containing that exact version information about a particular package, so that in the future it will not download the latest version of the library, because each version having some compatibility. If there is an issue with the compatibility, so my project will not run fine. So this is for that purpose. Git ignore is a file if you are going to deploy the code to the Git based version control system like GitHub, you can have GitLab, many others. So here you can mention what are the various files you are going to ignore. So don't upload the node modules to the Git, your repo. Don't upload this build folder. Don't upload these files and folder to the repository. So we never push the node modules, we never push all these folder, because these folders we use only for development purpose. They are not making any sense to have on the production machine and any another place, because these folders are specific to the machine, specific to the system as well sometimes. So anything which is specific to a machine, which is specific to a system, we never push to the repo. That's why we are ignoring them. Then we having here the src folder where we have to write the source code of our application. So here we having, if you're looking at, first look at the public folder. In the public folder, we having this index.html. So here we are building the single page application. So which single page is responsible for rendering all the necessary files? So this index.html is the single page. So this single page having a div with ID root. So inside this div, I'm going to initialize my React.js application. So using the document.getElement by ID, I will get this div where I'm getting this div in my index.js. So you can see I'm reading it here, document.getElement by ID, and using the React home, I'm getting the root element. And finally using the root element, I'm rendering it, root.render, and this app I'm rendering over there. So this is a single page which is responsible to load all the necessary dependency of our application. So whatever the public pages you having which don't need any permission to access them, we will add inside this public folder. So like images, CSS, like things we will add inside this public folder. And what are the various node modules we are using in our application? It is a part of the node underscore modules folder. So in node underscore modules folder, those things are available. So here, just like we having the index.html, we having the index.js. This is the main file here, which is containing all the dependency of our application. So directly and indirectly, we have to tell everything to this index.js file. So if you look at here, I'm importing this two main library, React and React DOM. Recently in React 18, they changed the syntax. Now it is React dash DOM slash client. Before that, it was only React DOM. This is a new change they did in React 18. Even in React 18, they just changed the way of initialization as well. Then we having here index.css. If you're willing to have a application label CSS, so I can add over there. A application label CSS code can be added over there. If you're willing to add a CSS specific to a component. So you can see we having app.js, it's a simple component. And this component having its own specific CSS inside this app.css. So what I'm doing here, I'm just removing everything from here, remove it. Let me add a simple div and now write the code from scratch. So I'm adding here, let's say hello React this way. I'm removing this CSS, I'm removing this logo as well. So what are the CSS we have? Let me remove whatever this test file also. Let me remove here. This logo also remove. Clear? It's a simple component. So to access this function outside this file, I'm exporting this function over there. It is similar to we having the public access modifier for exporting a class from a package, from a namespace. Similar way we are using it export. Then in index.js, I'm using the import statement for importing my app. And here any file we can import directly here like this way. So we will start writing the code from this app.js from here. And one more thing to understand here, whenever we are creating the many pages in the application, so we need a layout as well, or you can say we need a master component as well. You can say the master view. So this app.js I'm going to use as a master view simply. So what I'm having here, I'm just going to start with first topic of the React, that is about data binding. Before the data binding, let me look at the, okay, let me open this PPT. Before that, let me understand the components in the React.js. So whenever you're looking at the React, so what the web page you will build in the React.js? A web page can be, think of a collection of component. You can see here, this is my single web page, which can have a separate component for header, separate component for category, news feed, footer, article, and comments. So we having the many components. So together these components we are clubbing, or we are making the web page here. And in the React.js, we having the two types of components. We having the class-based component and we having the functional component. So starting from the React.js 16.8, nobody now preferring the class-based component. Now everyone is focusing on the functional component. Even React.js team itself promoting to use the functional component and hooks to write the code. But the class-based component was quite popular before the hooks introduction in React. So I will tell you both the syntax, but my focus would be on the functional component. Even what other project we will build using the only function component hooks. So as per the latest recommendation, we will use those things over there. So when it is coming to the component, as I said, we having the two types of component, class-based component and functional component. So this is the example we having here for class-based component. You can see It is the same way as we create the class yesterday. We can create a class binding. Then at the class label, we having the state for keeping the data. It's a functional component where we having a function, it's arrow function, which we are using here simply. So let me show you here. So this is my functional component, but the same thing we can have using the class-based component as well. So what I can do here, I can have a class. And always remember one thing, whenever you are using the component name in the React.js, so component name always start from the capital letter. So it should not start from the small letter, it should start always from the capital letter here. Now let me extend it from the component class. That is a built-in class in React. This way. Then in the class label, we can have a constructor here like this way. And as per the inheritance rule, we need to call the parent class constructor like this way. And a class-based component having a render method this way. This render method always return a single element. It will return here a return. So I can return here a div this way. So we cannot have actually div like this way. It cannot return two div. If you will try, you will get the error. So there should be a parent div, and inside the parent div, we can have many divs over there. So it always designed to return only one element, or you can say component can return only one element. And inside that element, you can have its child element. So here inside this div, I can have a heading h2. Let's say class component. It's a one element. I can another element. So class based components in this way. So this can also be the things. And if you want to export this my app, so this my app also I can export. Let's say instead of exporting this one, I can export this one. Export default my app. This one I can export. So now let me run the application here. I'm running the application using the command prompt. So to run the application, it is running the command npm start. I'm running like this way. So make sure guys, you're taking the notes. Are you taking the notes? You can see I'm getting the output like this way, class components. And here, if you look at here, I'm exporting it with the name my app. But here I'm importing it with the name app. Do you know why it's working? Here it is app and here it is my app. The reason behind it, I'm exporting it with default keyword. But you can export only one element from a file as default. So whatever you're exporting with default, you can import it with any name. But let's say if I'm not using the default here, I'm using a simple one. Export my app. So I can mention here it's a, let's say export class. So in this case, it will start giving the error. You can see, because now it is a named export. So now it is a named export. So I have to import it, all the name export here in this curly braces, my app. And here also need to change it, my app, this way. So named export will be imported with the name. It's working fine. And default export, we can import with any name. I'm making it as it is. And here also making it as it is. So these are the things also you should know whenever you're dealing with the React.js. So these are the basic of the ESX modules you should know. How the module we export, how the module we import. I hope it makes sense. So Let's do one thing here. I'm adding here a file, and the file name I'm just adding here, let's say my component .js, and this code, let's say I'm moving over there so that you will have whenever you will use it later on. I'm exporting like this way. I'm giving the name as well, my component, this way. And this one I can import here. Let's make, so I can import it here simply. So I can import here with the name my component, this way. So my app I made as a parent component, and my component is a child one. So this I'm using. And always make a habit to use these as a capital one. So it automatically updated the things for me. Okay. So this is the way how the component we created and how we are importing. And here how we using the app.js simply. So the first thing which you need to know about the React.js after having a understanding about the class-based component and the function component, the JSX one. So what is the JSX one? So JSX is a mix of HTML and JavaScript. So mix of HTML and JavaScript we are calling here JSX. It is a JavaScript XML. So whenever you are going to integrate your JavaScript code inside the HTML, we use a pair of brushes. A pair of brushes we use to inject it. So this is an example I'm having here where I'm just adding two numbers, 3 plus 5 simply. We having the JSX attribute as well. If we're willing to define some attribute, we define class name. I'm not using the class word as it is because class is a reserved keyword in the JavaScript. So what are the reserved keyword we having? Let's say class. Are we having the others? We cannot use them as it is. We use the different name. So for class, we use class name because class we also use in the CSS class. And for the inner HTML, we use here dangerously set inner HTML. Okay. And a style we use as a object. And for on change, we use the event over there. So let's see how we can do it here. So to understand this one, just do one thing. Let me add a file with the name JSX.js. So JSX means JavaScript plus XML is JSX here simply. So for the JSX one, what I can do here, I can create here a functional component. So let me add here a function, and the function name is, let's say, JSX. I'm not passing any parameter, I'm using simply. So it will have a return statement this way. And let me return, because function returns something to us this way. As a heading, I'm adding here, let's say, JSX. This is a heading I added. Now let me export it. So export default JSX. Now I can import it. Where I can import it here. So let me comment this one. I'm importing here in JSX this way. So for using the JSX, I can import like this way, import. And then we having the JSX. It's a named default export. So that's I'm using this way. So JSX one. So here we can use a self-closing tag as well. Even we can use the open tag and the closing tag. There is no difference in both the syntax. So this is known as self-closing tag, and this is known as opening tag and closing tag. So opening tag and closing tag, we prefer to use when we are willing to put something in between opening tag and closing tag. If you're not putting anything between the opening tag and the closing tag, you can go ahead with the self-closing tag. This is a preferred style. So that's why I don't want to put anything between the opening and closing tag. So that's I'm using a self-closing JSX tag. Okay, now I'm just going to use here the simple thing. So here what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to use here two variables. So what I'm doing, I'm defining a variable num1 equal to 3, num2 equal to 5. This I'm using. Yeah. Now these two numbers I can add. Let's say sum of these two numbers can be done like this, num1 plus num2 this way. So if you want to see the output, you will see the output here. I'm getting a sum as 8. So it is a JavaScript variable which we are using here simply. So this is a simple expression of the JavaScript we have used. So the thing is, this is the way how we can use the numbers. We can do the number manipulation. Now the thing is, if let's say we having a CSS class. So for the CSS class, let's say there is index.css. I'm adding here my CSS class with the name red, where I'm using here color. As a color, let's say I'm reading here red color simply. So this class, let's say I'm going to use. So in the JSX, I can put here a class. So it should be the class name, not the class only, because class is a reserved keyword in the JavaScript. Then let me use the color red this way. It will set the CSS class as red, perfectly working fine. But sometime it happens we are willing to apply the inline style. So inline style we can apply here. Let's say I'm adding here a div, and this is for inline style. So inline style I can define like this way style. And style in itself is an object. So here it's an object where I can use font size. And whenever you are using the JavaScript, it is a always follow the camel case. So when we write the same thing in the CSS, we write this way font dash size. That is, let's say 16 pixel. But if the same thing you write in the JavaScript, it would be font F small S capital. It is a camel case. Font size, I'm having, let's say 15 pixel. And how we define the JavaScript object? In JavaScript object, field are separated by comma, not separated by semicolon. Remember it. So these are separated by comma. So same thing I did here. Let's say color, I'm using here as a color. It would be, let's say, blue. This way. You will see here, I'm getting here this one. Inline style with blue color. Simply. Even I can move out this style to a separate one. I can cut it. And here I can mention, let's say let. And here I can define a style. Let's say my style equal to this JavaScript object. Then I can call it here my style. This way. So this is the way how the style I can define as a JavaScript object with all the setting, font size, color. Similar way I can define background color as well. So in the background, B should be small, and in color it should be, C should be capital. So follow the camel case always. So this is about the style. Sometimes it happens you're willing to set the HTML content as well. Or you can say there can be a case here is storing the HTML data in the database, and that HTML you want to bind it. So let's say it is my HTML data. Let me write here simply for span. So this is, let's say, HTML data we have. So this HTML data I'm going to bind to a div. How I can bind? I can bind here like this way. Dangerously set inner HTML simply. And syntax for this one is, it is HTML, then HTML data. This way I can set. So this is similar to the inner HTML. In JavaScript, we having the inner HTML to set it, but here we having the dangerously set inner HTML. So you can see HTML data is coming. If you will inspect it, you will get a span is binding. Can you see? It is binding the span simply. This is font size, this is color, this is the class here. So both are working simply. So the another things we having here, let's say whenever we are dealing with any programming language, so we need to know about the conditional statements. We need to know about the loops, the switch statement. So those things also I'm going to show you how we can use simply. So for if statement, let's say I'm going to check out here whether a number is even or odd. So simply I can write here a function. Let's say function I'm writing here. Check even or odd, where I can pass a number for checking. So I will pass here a number for checking it here. Then I can add a condition if num modulus 2 equal to 0. Then return here, return div, it would be here even number, else it would be here odd number. So for this one I can do simply here I'm adding h3 ng if, and then I'm calling it here for even and odd. So I'm just using here check even and odd number, do pass a number. I'm passing a 3. So what should get the output? It should get the output and here odd number. Can you see? Odd number I'm getting here. Even I can show the side by side things. So this I'm getting here odd number and even number. But this is a function I'm just using to call it. But it's the same thing you want to do here itself. And instead of calling as a function, so what I can do here, I can start with a block. So what are the function I have written before? I have to define here self executable function. I can define here a self executable function. How the self executable function we can define? Let me first define a function. So this is my arrow function. And how this arrow function I can execute at the same place in the same statement when I will call it as a function. So let me wrap it in parenthesis like this way and call it as a function. So this is my self executable function syntax. Always remember it. So write arrow function, just wrap it in parenthesis and call it. And it is not necessary it should be the arrow function. It can be the anonymous function as well. That is also possible. It's up to you whether you are using anonymous function, whether you are using the arrow function. So anonymous function also it can be this way. So in this case, don't use arrow function. It is also perfectly valid. So both style can be used, arrow function or anonymous function. So I suggest you here make a habit to use arrow function. That is, syntax is also easy this way. Same thing we can do here now. So what I will do here, I'm checking here whether the number is even and odd. So whether pass the parameter from here, I can pass parameter from here. I will receive the value here, num. Then I can add the condition, same condition. So same condition I can write here. So this is the parameter I'm passing to this function, and this here I will receive it. Inside it, I'm checking if number modulus 2 equal to 0, even or odd. You can see I'm getting here even number this time. Clear? Okay, the if statement also we can use with another syntax. How? We can use here logical and operator also. So logical and operator also I can use. So let's do one thing here. I'm using this num1 variable. And this num1 variable, I'm just going to divide by 2 equal to 0. Then it should be here. Let's say even number. For odd number, it is also if, where I'm using the logical and operator. Greater than 0. Look at the right hand side, you will get the odd number. Can you see? I'm getting odd number. So for num1 I will not get it because both are odd. Let me change it to the 1 6, and I will change, let's say, num2. Okay, it should be num1, it should be num2. Then we will get the output. Okay, so num2 is a even number, num1 is a odd number, so it is working. If it is false, it will not render it simply. So it is only if, it is only if, it is also only if. So this is for only if. If you need the if else, so this is only if, this is if else. So if else we can use here using the ternary operator as well. There is a one more syntax I can use for if else. Let's say num1 modulus 2 equal to 0, then it is a even number. So it would be here even number, else odd number. Even we can use it empty element. This syntax is also known as empty element. It means it's not a any HTML tag, but it's an empty HTML tag. Benefit of this empty HTML tag is it will not unnecessarily create an element, an HTML element. Because if let's say I will add a div here, it will come immediately into the next line because div having a display block. Can you see? But in the previous case, it was rendering as a simple text, not as a HTML element. So you can see it is rendering as HTML element as a odd number, but I can use a simply, it will render as a simple text. Can you see? As a simple text, it is rendering. So you have to decide whether you need a HTML element, whether you don't need. Based upon that, you can use empty tag or a div or paragraph tag. Now we having here a switch statement. So for the switch, let's think about we having an alphabet. And based upon the alphabet, I want to show whether it's vowel or not vowel. So I can use here the self-executable function simply. This way I can use. Then I can use a switch. In the switch, I can use a, let's say, alphabet. Then alphabet. In the alphabet, I have to return whether it's a vowel or consonant. So I can use a, let's say, a vowel. So now break does not need it. It is not vowel. So for vowel, we need to check it for A. Okay. It is same way as we do in the JavaScript, same syntax you have to follow. So this way we'll find out. So alphabet should be a receiving parameter here, and we pass a letter. So you can see I'm getting here vowel. Let me pass here D, not vowel. Can you see? Now we want to use here loop. How we can use the loop? So loop, obviously we are going to run through whenever we having a list of data. Then we will use the loop. So what I'm defining here, let's say colors. And we having a colors, let's say red. It's, let's say, blue. It's, let's say, green. This is an array. So in the React.js, map is a function we prefer always. So let's say I'm using here UL and li I will repeat. So I will repeat here, let's say using colors dot map method. Then I will have a index and item comma index this way. Then it will return a li. In here I'm using your item this way. So here it will let us know, you can see red, blue, green. But here whenever you are returning something from a map, an element, it should have a key. So as a best practice, you should always define the key. As a key, better way is it just mention index this way. So this is the syntax you have to always remember for using the loops here. So here we have done all the necessary fundamental things you should know how to integrate the HTML and the JavaScript together, how to do the things. Clear? So the JSX part I have done. So now let's proceed further. So the next thing we having here, data binding. How we can bind the data. So in that case, let's do one thing. Let me add a file with the name of binding.js. And here I can use either class-based component, either functional component. So let me take the example of class-based component here, class binding. And let me extend here component built-in class this way. User method render and it will return div data binding. Let me use h2 for data binding, and I can wrap the thing inside constructor. like this way. I can export it here, export class binding simply. So for the data binding in class based component, we having a built-in object state. First of all, let me call the parent class constructor using the super. It's a built-in contain the state. So what are the things you're going to create at the component label? We always use a state over there. So state we are using here for maintaining the function, for maintaining a component state at the component label. So here let's say I'm keeping the name as Mohan. I'm keeping the company. So as a company, I'm using here, let's say .NET Trex. So these values, let's say I'm going to bind. So here when it is coming to the binding, I can use here simple binding, or you can say the one with binding. So simple binding, we can use here state dot name. So simple binding, I can do here this dot state dot name. I can access like this way. If you want to call something on a button click, so we having their event binding. So I can use here, let's say event binding, event binding. For event binding, let's say we should have a button. For button, I'm having the on click. For on click, I will define here method, handle click. So here, let me define a method for handle click. I'm defining here handle click as a function. In handle click, I can show here message alert. In the alert, I can show here, let's say hi, then name. What is the name I'm using at this dot state dot name. So here I can access it this dot handle click, and it would be here click. So what I'm doing here, I'm just going to capture here on click event, and this on click I'm calling this handle click like this way. So when you will click on this button, it will call this handle click. And to access this binding, let me import it here. So I'm going to import this binding component here this way. So you can see I'm getting a simple binding Mohan, even binding click here, I'm getting here hi Mohan. Can you see? And here if you will see, I'm using here arrow function. If let's say I'm not using here arrow function, I'm using here, let's say a simple function, let's say handle function click, where I'm not using the arrow function. This way I'm using handle function click. I'm defining here another one, handle click function, click arrow function. So can you see here? So whenever I'm clicking here function, it's working fine, but this one is not working. The reason behind it, let me remove for a while this one. Now it is working. Can you see? But as soon as I will put here this dot state dot name, it's not working. The reason is here the named function and anonymous function have their own this. So this behavior, it's changing. If you click here, can you see I'm getting the error? Cannot read property of undefined state. So it's not able to find out the state on this. But here this is pointing to the right class. So there is always an issue whenever you are using the named function or anonymous function with the this keyword. But with the arrow function, we will not have any such issue. So that's why I always prefer to use arrow function to handle this one. If you want to resolve this scope, so we having the option here, this dot handle function click equal to this dot handle function click and bind here this keyword. So we have to call the bind method to bind the scope of this. Now it will work fine after binding it. Click here, it's working fine. Can you see? So now both are working. So always you have to do this one if you're using a named function. So instead of binding this, better way is here, go ahead with arrow function. You don't need to worry about the scope of this keyword. Is it clear? And if you want to do here the two-way data binding, how it can be done? So for two-way data binding, it's not supported by default in React. In Angular, it is there. On the React.js, actually, we need to use the event binding to implement the flow for two-way binding. Let me show the example. Two-way binding like Angular, how we can implement here. So I'm adding here a div, then I'm adding here a text box. Input text box. Input type text. Then I can bind a value. I'm binding here a value for company. This I'm binding the value for company, that is this dot state dot company. This I'm binding the company here. Then let me capture here on change, because text box having the on change event. So I can mention here on change, and here I'm mentioning here this dot handle change. So this handle change I will mention it. So let me mention it handle change arrow function simply. So in this handle change, what we will do, we will capture the event. So whatever the event we are firing, I will capture in this handle change. And this is the event we having for a text box. So what we have to do here, we having a method set state to update this state name and company. So let me bind here name itself. So this dot set state. Now let me update the name field. So name field I will update whatever the event we are firing. So event having a target element and target element having a value field. So this is my target element and target element having the value field. Because whatever the value we will change to the text box. So actually you are changing the value attribute of that input element. So here I'm updating the state. If you will not handle this handle change, what will happen? You will not able to change the text box value. Try to change it, it's not changing. But as soon as I will uncomment this, I'm able to change it. Mohan space Kumar. Can you see? And wherever you are using this Mohan, it's updating, isn't it? So this is behaving just like two-way data binding, but it's not a built-in one. Through the event binding, we are doing it. Clear how it can be done two-way binding like syntax here. And sometime it happens, you might be willing to pass any parameter whenever you're calling an event. So how we can pass the event parameter? So here I'm willing to pass some data to call it. So handle click with params. Handle click with params. And here you will get a param. Okay. And what are the parameters you are getting? I'm just showing you here. Params. So this is past value we having. So handle click params we having. So click handle click. So in this case, I'm passing the function reference. I'm not calling it like this way. If you will call it like this way, what will happen? It will call at function load. So I can pass a parameter value, and you can see at the function load, it is rendering. Can you see? So whenever the component is loading, that time it's, so it should be called whenever I'm doing the button click. So let's call it as a callback function. So it is going to be now as a callback function this way. So click here, now I'm getting pass value. Can you see? So this is the way we can make it later. If you will use it as a function, it will immediately called. But I don't want to call it immediately. I want to call it whenever somebody is clicking on a button as a event handler. So this is a wrapping you have to do here. And it is not necessary, it should be here E. It should be here, let's say, simple function as well. It's arrow function simply. So this way, to the events, we can pass the parameters as well, simply. So we have done with the JSX and we have done with the data binding. Now, if the same things you are willing to do here in functional component, because the thing is in the class-based component, we having the state, but in the function component, we don't have the state, we use their hooks. So the same code you are willing to use there, how it can be used? Let me show the example here. So I can create here, let's say export function binding. I'm creating a function component for doing the same thing. So it will return div that is h2 data binding. So in the function component, how we keep the data at the component label. So till React 16.8, we don't have any way to keep the data at the function component label. But starting from React 16.8, we having the React hooks. So I can take the help of hooks. So we having here the hooks use state. As we having the state in class-based component, here we having the use state. So with the help of use state, I can create the similar type of object like this way. How? I can define here use state. So in the use state, I can use my object name. Let's say object name is data. Then default value. As a default value, let's say I'm using here Mohan. I'm using here company. Same sample I'm repeating here using the hook syntax as per the latest standard. This way I can do it here now. Now if you want to bind the data here, So let's, as per the simple data binding, let me copy these things. Only this. How it can be done? We don't have the state, but we having the data. It would be here data.name. Can you see I'm getting here, Mohan? So now data is going to be used, or whatever the name you will define it going to be used. Similar way, if you want to do here event binding, let me copy everything and change the sample. So here we have to define the handle click. So handle click would be here a function like this way. I'm using here arrow function. So simple, it would be arrow function where I can show the alert box. In the alert box, I can show hi, then name, data dot name. This is handle click. For functional component, it is handle function click. It would be here anonymous function this time, and it would be the functional component. For passing the parameter, it's handle click params, where I'm having the params. So these params I can mention. So it would be here passed params. This way I can mention. Then we can have handle change. It is passed value. Then we having the handle change. So for handle change, we having the set data. So there we having set. Here we having the set data. So this would be similar to the handle change, and value would be here data.name. Data.name. So theme I'm replicating here by using this one. Okay, I think handle click. So we need to define constant as well, so that we can call them. And this will not be used here because this we are not using inside the function. We use this on only inside the class. This way. Can you see? Arrow function, anonymous function, handle click, change the value here. Can you see? Working fine. So this is a sample code we have done as per the functional component and the hooks. So you have to focus only on this syntax because this is the latest and the recommended syntax now. But this is also perfectly valid if you're working with the old React.js application. There we use the state like this way. But we have to focus on the syntax. So let me get started with routing in the React. So React.js does not have built-in support for the routing. We have to use the third-party library here. So when it is coming, the routing in the React.js, so it is happening at the browser end itself. At the browser level, it is there. So here nothing is coming from the server whenever you are navigating from one page to another page. It is going to serve from the browser itself. And for implementing the routing in the React.js, we having here many libraries. So we having the React router, we having the React navigation, we having the reach router. So these are the many libraries we are having. So most popular library here, we having the React router. So here we will use the React router to implement the routing. So in the React router, we having these packages: React Router DOM, React Router Native. So whenever you're dealing with the website, then we use a React Router DOM. Whenever you're dealing with the React Native, then we use React Router Native. So to get started with routing, let me use here React Router DOM. So in the React.js application, I'm going to install here React Router DOM npm package. So it is here React Router DOM. And here we need the bootstrap as well so that we can make the UI good. So we having a package for bootstrap as well. So bootstrap I can install along with the React Router DOM this way. I'm just saving them into this packet.json file. So that's I'm using here. I've missed the npmi word. Let me mention that one also. So this is the way it has been done here now. So here to configure the routing, let us start from the index.js. So here I need to wrap it inside the browser router. So let me import here the statement for React Router DOM where we having the browser router. Now let me wrap it inside the browser router. This is the first step we have to take care of. Then in the app.js, what are the component we are importing here? All these component we need to wrap inside the roots. So I'm using here roots, and inside the roots, let me define here root for each component like this. So let me define the path for home page. Then we having the element. In element, I'm using here the JSX in this way. So JSX I'm using here for home page. Then I'm having for binding. Then I'm having for component. So second one we having here, let's say for component this way. So I'm adding here component. Then third one I'm having here for binding. So this is I'm having for binding. This is my binding here. So now let's connect them through a menu as well. So let me define here a menu. So what we can do here, we can define a menu using the bootstrap. So I'm having here the bootstrap 5 snippets extension installed in my IDE. So through that I can generate the bootstrap menu here this way. So BS5 dash navvar minimal UL is a shortcut I'm selecting. You can see press tab key, tab. Then it will generate the complete UI for you. And the extension for this one is this is the extension. You can note down the important extension for the React. So just I'm using the extension here, auto close tag, auto rename tag here. Then we have extension for bootstrap 5 cookie snippets. So I'm using here React native snippets as well. So these are the some important extension I'm using here to get started here. So bootstrap 5 cookie snippets extension for generating the React Redis snippets. This extension we having here, and then I install the extension to convert HTML to JSX. So instead of converting the HTML to JSX ourselves or manually, this is the good extension. you should use. Even you can have an extension for JavaScript code snippets, the extension for path intelligence. Then we having the extension for Visual Studio key map here. So these are the many extension you must have to get started with the React here simply. Even the same will help you in Angular as well, in others also. So this is the way how I generated the code for this one. Now this is span, I'm just having it. So this is for my home page, and here I'm using 2. So 2 equal to, it is empty. For home page, it is like this way. Ally class is active here. This is anchor tag. Then this is I'm having for JSX. Then we can have for component. So let me use it for component in this way. And then we can have for binding here. So this one I'm having for binding. So this way it is for binding. And to keep everything into the center of the screen, let me wrap it inside a div container. So class name we having here container, this way. And one more thing I need to do here, I need to convert it into the JSX one. Select, convert it HTML to JSX. I converted the JSX HTML to JSX easily. And we don't have the anchor tag here, we having the nav link. So let me use here nav link. So nav link is available in React router in this way, nav link. So I'm using here nav link, it automatically renaming my closing tag as well because of auto rename tag this way. So we have connected the home page, JSX1 component and binding. And these extensions are helping me to auto close the tag, auto rename the tag. These are the extension I'm using here simply. Now I can run the application to check it out here. So npm start. So this is the way how the things are coming, but still I'm not getting the bootstrap menu properly because I have not imported the bootstrap anywhere. So let me import the bootstrap at index.js. So I'm importing here bootstrap. So let me import here node underscore modules. So this is node underscore modules. I'm using here bootstrap. Then distribution CSS, and we having the bootstrap dot CSS this way, and import everything. So import everything from here this way. So now you can see I'm getting the JSX one. Okay. Binding is coming. So JSX one, we don't have any path actually for JSX one. It is a home page only. So let me remove this link. For component, we have to mention here my component. So this was the issue here simply. Now it should render properly. Component binding. Can you see? So this way you can configure the routing in React to set up the things. So for the first step, need to follow here, import browser router, wrap it everything in the browser router, then create the routes like this way, and then define the menu and there use navlink and connect with other path are available here. Okay, now let's see if you are looking for a URL, but that is not available. That can be done through defining a one more route here for not found. Submitting a file for not found .js. So let me use a React functional component that is not found. And here I'm adding the heading for h2 that is not found. Now let me import it here. So I'm importing here path. So path would be here asterisk. So here I'm using the asterisk. Then element would be here not found this way. Navlink you can define anywhere. Even this one I will move to a separate component later on. If you're willing to move, you can move it here. If let's say you want to move it into a separate one, you can do one thing. You can create a folder for, let's say, shared one this way. And this I can move here. It can be the part of any file. Nav, let's say header dot JS, a React functional component. So I can move it completely here, cut and put it here. Now finally, I can import the header here, header in this way, and it should work. But make sure nav link we define here. This way we can move. And here I'm not using the nav link. I can delete here. This way, working fine. Okay, so I'm looking for a page which is not available. Let's say binding 1, 2. It is going to the not found now. So this is the way how the not found component we can render. So now let's say you're willing to pass some parameters to the root. How we can pass them? So for this one, let me add here one more component with the name of product, where I will pass the product ID. So this is h2 product, and here I will define receive the parameters. Let me define here product. It is product, and let me do mention parameter / ID. The same thing we will define at this header.js. In header.js, I will define the same thing. So let me define it for product. And I'm passing here a hard code value. But when we will do the database operation, at that time we will pass the proper things here. So I'm passing here product like this way. And then I'm receiving it simply. So if you will see here, product is rendering, but parameter I'm not receiving anywhere. So to receive the parameter here, we having the option of use params. So at the product label, I can use here a hook, use params. So I'm using here use params in this way. So with the help of the use params, I can get the parameter value. So I can mention here the past parameter, and here I can use params dot id this way. And if you look at, it's coming here. The past parameter is 4. 4 is coming simply. Similar way, I can mention here query parameter. Sometime it happen you're passing the things as a query string. So for query string, I can define a one more root for query, where I can pass ID and other things. So here I'm just passing these things here. Then here I'm passing the thing. Let's say I'm passing here name. So name of the product, let's say I can pass here a React. I can pass here, let's say price this way. So here these parameter values I can receive. So let's see how we can receive it in the product itself. And for this one, I don't need to define any extra root. At the product label itself, I can get it. So at the product label, we having here Q params option, where I'm using here use search params. And then I can do mention here div, then the past query parameter, the past query parameters. This way I can get it Q params, and in the Q params we having the option to get the things. So Q param should be is an array like this way. Then get method. I'm calling here name. Then we having here Q params get and get the price here. This way I can get it. So this is the way how I'm getting the name, how I'm getting the price. This way I'm getting it. And if you will see here, right now I'm not getting any value, but if as soon as I will click here, I start getting React and this name also. So in the header, make sure we have mentioned the things properly. It is fine here. So it is coming. Can you see? So you can see I'm passing a name and price as a query string. Same I'm receiving. I'm receiving the name, I'm receiving the price. This ID is coming. Here ID is coming, but other things I'm not getting, but here ID is coming. And other things also I'm getting. So this way it should work. So we have done with the routing here, and we have passed the parameters also. So the next thing which you need to know about the React is how we can implement the inheritance here. So inheritance at the class component label, we can inherit in the same way as we inherit in the JavaScript. So when we are inheriting a parent class and the child class, so parent class constructor we call here using the super keyword. So using the super call, I can do it like this way. Even if I'm willing to call the parent class method, I can call like this way. Super.render is option I can use to do it. So let's see how I can use the inheritance here. So I'm adding the file. So I'm adding my file here simply for inheritance. Inheritance.js. So let me add a React functional component. This way I'm using h2 inheritance. So it's not a functional component, actually it should be the class component, React class component, where I'm using the parent component here. So it is, let's say h2 parent. And let's say in that class based component, do you know we can use here state. So here, let me call the parent class constructor using the super. Then I'm defining here this dot state. I'm defining the name. As a name, let's say I'm using here, let's say company name. So company name I'm defining here, let's say dot matrix. This one I'm defining. So now here I can show the things here just next to the parent. I can use this dot state dot company. So this is coming at the parent component label. And here don't export it. I will export only child component. So React class component again I'm creating. And this time I'm creating for child here. So let me use child. And I will extend it from my parent component this way. And in the child component, let's say I'm going to access the state. So this is my child. And here let me access the state. So parent state, I can access this dot state. I'm accessing the company this way. So what is the state I've defined at the parent component label, I can access at the child component label. Simply this way I'm accessing it. So now I can connect it with my app.js. I'm connecting it here. So this is my inheritance like this way. I'm using here child component. Now let me connect it through header. Through header, I can connect it. Inheritance. This I'm connecting. So this way it is coming here. Child.matrix perfectly coming here. Even in the child label, if I'm willing to call the parent one, I can call it. I can call it here using the super keyword. Super dot we having the render method. This way I can call it. So super class render method, I can call it here. And it is coming parent dot matrix child dot matrix. So this way it is coming parent dot matrix child dot matrix. Both the things are coming here perfectly like this way. So this is the way how the inheritance, if you're willing to do, you can do it here. The next important thing we have in here, composition. Sometimes it happens you're willing to create the reusable UI component or UI element. So in that case, composition will help you. Even the React.js team recommend to use the composition over the inheritance. In this example, if you're looking at here, we need to create buttons. So the buttons, what we have done, we are creating here a button, and the button I'm just passing here this text. So button is a tag in HTML. So that button tag, let's say you're willing to reuse at more than one place. Let's say you're willing to create the different types of button. In some button, you might be sending the CSS class. In some button, you might not be sending. So in that case, do we have any way, let's say, where I can decide my button things? So through the composition, it can be done. So let's see how we can use the composition to create our own element. So for composition, I'm adding here a new file for composition in .js. So now here, let me define here a button. So I'm defining here, let's say constant button. I'm using here, let's say props. And finally, this one will return a button tag. So we having a button tag in HTML. So button, many things we can define here. Let's say button class, I can pass from the UI. So let's say I'm passing here, let's say props dot class name. If I'm willing to apply any CSS class to the button, then here I can apply the button value, props dot value. So what are the value I want to give to the button, I can define over there. So now here I can do one thing. This button I can use as per my uses. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to create, let's say, a login page. So React functional component where I'm using it for. Okay, let's use a composition itself. In composition, I'm just creating a login page this way. So let me define here a form tag. Even here, I can create a my input tag as well. Let's say input tag I'm creating like this way. Props, and you can define here input tag. So what it will do here, it will return here a input tag. So type I will pass from here, let's say props dot type in this way. Even I can add a condition as well here. So let's say I can use here a constant or let's say let for type. So let's say we having the props dot type. If it is there, then use a props dot type. Otherwise, by default, type would be here text. Because sometimes it happen, you might not be passing the type. Even by default, type would be here text also here. But in case of undefined, it will create the issue. So this type value I can set from here like this way. And then I can define here class name. So class name should be like this way, props dot class name. So this is a wrong syntax. It should be like this way, class name. So now here I'm willing to create a text box. So I'm adding here a label for username. Then we having here input this way. An input I can define here type property input type text. Let's say I'm not defining here any. I'm just passing it class name. The class name, let's say form dash control. This I'm passing. So this is my own control I have created. I can wrap it in a div like this way. And I can add here a class name where I'm using margin bottom 3. Because in Bootstrap, I have to give some gap from the next section of the div. So that's I'm using here margin bottom 3. Then second thing we having here password. And this time I can define here input type what it is. It is password. So this is my password. And here I can pass the name as well. Let's say name. So name would be here, let's say props dot name this way. So I can pass the name also. So name would be here, let's say user name. This is my username. Here also it is my password. Now I can use this button here simply. So I can add a button. So this is my button I'm having. So button value I can give. So this is my login. I can define class name. We having btn dash primary. This way. I can add here, let's say cancel. So this way I'm having the value here. And import should be a top level like this way. So I'm using here class name, I'm using here value. This is class name, this is the value I'm using. So this way how the composition we are doing here simply button and input we have defined. Now let me add here the routing here. So I can add here a one more route that is for composition. Composition, import it. Composition. This way I can import for composition here. In header, I'm adding for composition. So this is here composition. I'm using here composition this way. So you can see it is coming here, username, text for type here, anything, type here, anything, it's dot dot. Can you see? So this complete form we have designed using our own element for button, for input. So this way the things can be done here. And here I can add a different class, let's say warning. So that there is a difference you will get. And here I can use here ampersand and BSP. So this way you will get the gap here simply. Okay, the next thing we having here in the React, how we can pass the data. So you can see we are using here props, and from the child I can emit the event. Even the same thing you will find out here. Here this is input, this is button. So what are the input and button? Input and button are acting here as a child component. And what are the data I'm passing to the name field, class name field, I'm able to receive using the props. So I'm using here props, then I'm reading here using the class name, then value. Isn't it? But sometimes it happens you want to do reverse. So you want to get the things, you want to pass the thing from child to parent. So in that case, we take the help of event emitter. So we emit the event. Through that, we can do it. So let's do one thing. Let's say I'm adding here a data passing dot JS. I'm creating a separate thing so that you will understand. Let's say React function component I'm using here. Where I'm having, let's say, article here. An article detail, let's say I'm going to share. So this is H2. And this is my article title, what, or let's say I'm defining here heading as data passing. And here I can keep the state using the hooks here. So use state. Where we having the article. And here I can define the article detail. Let's article title. I'm having here what is React. I'm having here, let's say, article author. Let's say it is Mohan. Then we having, let's say, comments. Everything I'm doing hard code. Okay. Because objective is here to understand how data we can pass. Nice. Then we having here great. Good one. This will, let's say, we are having. So obviously few information you are showing here about the article. So you might having heading H4 where I'm using simply over here. So now let me import it here simply. I'm importing here use state article title. I'm using here div article author. Let's say I'm using it. And then let's say I want to show here the comments, but for comment, let's say I'm using a separate function component for comments like this way. It is a simple function, let's say. So I'm using here H4 comments, and the comments I will pass, and I will receive here using the props. So here I'm calling that comments component, and here I'm passing the comments. Let's say I'm just changing the variable name so that you will not confused my comments. So I can pass my comments here using the article dot comments. This way I can pass. Or what are the comments I'm getting in the props? I can repeat them using the props dot my comments. This thing dot map item index. Then return li. It is item. This way I can return li. Now I can have a button here. On that button, click. Let's say I want to count. I want to count the number of comments. So here I'm using the on click, and in this on click, let's say I'm using here handle click count. So this handle click I will define here at the comment component label. So constant handle click, and this is the callback I'm having simply. So this handle click I'm doing at the child component label. Even the same thing I just shown in the picture. From the child component, we call it. And I will call it. So first, let me count the number of comments here. Let's say count my comments dot length. And finally, these comments I will pass to the props and handle comment count. I will define a props there. And to this one, let me pass count here. So this handle comment count, where I will define. I will define here handle comment count. And to handle comment count, I can pass here a method, which I can call it constant handle comment. Handle count, let's say. I'm having this function. And here I can show the alert. So here I can get the counter. That counter will pass from here. Handle count. this way, and I'm using like this way. Handle count I'm passing as a reference, and this value, like whatever I'm receiving here, I will pass from the child component when I'm clicking on a event handler there. So this data passing I can define here. So I can create for data passing. So this is I'm having the data passing. Okay. The name I have not defined here, data passing, it is article. So it is article. Let me define here article. Data passing. So this way I can define data passing there. So if you will go here, it is coming. Comments are coming. And click here. You can see I'm getting 3 as an output. Is it clear how it is working? So as per this picture, it is working. From parents to child, I'm passing the thing using the probes. From child to parent, I'm emitting it. So the next thing which you need to understand is here, component lifecycle. So when we deal with the class-based component, we having these many things at the component lifecycle hooks level. Like we having the mounting that is coming to the initialization, updating, errors handling, and unmounting. So here, this is a mounting phase we having in the component lifecycle. So at the constructor level, we initialize the class member. Then we having a one more things here, get drive state from the props. If we are passing something from the props, we will get it here. Then it will call the render method to render the UI. After that, it is calling here the component did mount. So component did mounted method is used here to call something from the remote. Like you having the REST API, you having a service. So the REST API call I can wrap inside this component did mount method, and we can set the state. So when we are setting the state, then these things are happening here. So when we are setting the state, there is a should component update method, which will let us know whether we should render the UI or not. If it is returning the true, we should render it. If it is returning the false, we should not render it. Then here we having the component did update. In the component did update, it is going to fire after the component has been updated here. Then we having the errors. If let's say there is any error while executing these methods, so we can capture inside this get drive state from error. We can catch them in component did catch. And finally, for unloading, we having the component will unmount. This is another event which is going to be called here. So if you're not using the class-based component, then there is no meaning to go through these events, because nowadays we are not preferring the class-based component. But it is fine to understand if you are working with the older version of React JS and there people are still using the class-based component. So in our project, we will not use the class-based component. Everywhere I will use the functional component, not the class-based. So let's see, I'm writing the code here for the hooks. So here I'm adding the things into the life cycle dot JS. I'm adding it. So React functional, not React class component, where we having life cycle. So this way I'm using it H2 life cycle. And here I'm just using it inside constructor. Constructor, I'm using it in this way simply. So in the constructor, I need to call here parent class 1. Then I'm using here console log, and it is constructor like this way. So I'm using here the constructor over here. I can use here component did mount like this way. So component did mount here, it's coming simply. So I'm using here component did mount here. So I'm just using it here, component did mount this way. So this is my component did mount. I just define here like this way, and render we having here. This is my render. I can use here to mention it, render. So constructor is fine, component did mount, and this is my render. So this is the first phase we have done of the mounting here. So in the component did mount, what we can do here, we can load the data from the server, from the API. So what I can do here, I can call here my GitHub API. So we having here HTTPS and API dot github.com/users this way. And using this URL, I can get it. This is my fetch. I'm passing here URL and we having then. So what are the response I'm getting? The response I'm returning in the JSON format, like this way. And what the data I'm getting here, the data I will assign. So the data I will assign to a state. So I can define here this dot state object I'm defining here. So let's say we having the users empty array. So that I can set here this dot set state, and I'm setting here users colon data. So this is going to be used in such case where I'm fetching the data from the backend API. Constructor I'm using here to initialize it with default value. Clear? So there is a first mounting phase, then we having the updating. So whenever you're calling the set state method, it is initiating this updating phase. Then it first check into the it should component update. So should component update method I can define, and here I can decide whether I should call the render method again or not, because once render method has been called. But if I'm doing the change in the component did mount, so render method should be called again so that we can update the UI. So here we have to return from here either true, either false. So let me add here a condition. If let's say this dot state dot users dot length has been changed. And here we always get two parameters. Let's say new props I will get here and new state I will get here. So changes in the props and changes in the state I will get it here. So if new state containing the user's length different as it was in previous state, so it should return true because I'm using a not equal to. Equal to means, so it will return here true. So when it will return true, it will call this render method again. When it will return false, it will not call the render method. And one more thing to understand here, whatever the method we just marked as unsafe, these methods has been deprecated and not recommended to use. So that's all the unsafe method I'm not showing. What are the important one? We are only looking at those methods. So this thing I have done here should component update. That is returning the true and false. If value has changed true, then it will call the render method again. This way. Same thing will happen whenever you're calling the force update. It will call the render it. So sometime it happens you might be doing some change using the jQuery or using the some other library. It happens whenever you're doing the changes outside the React.js context. So in that case, forcefully, let's say you're willing to call the render method so that we can update the UI. So their force update will help us. Then this is a component did update where I can find out the component has been updated. Finally here, component did update simply. Let me define here component will unmount. So we have here component will unmount. So it is going to call in the last here. Component will unmount this way. So to check the behavior, let me define the routing here. I'm defining the routing for life cycle. So this is life cycle. And in the header, let me define it. In header, I'm defining it life cycle. So this is life cycle I'm having. So if you will say this is my life cycle is coming, and everything will come inside the in the console here. So one thing is missing here when I'm doing the, it is not the error here, it's the error in this composition, not in composition data passing, where I'm not mentioning the key here, index. So now we will not get any error. So you can see it is calling the constructor here 2 times, render here, component did mount, will unmount. So let's say we are product query, I'm coming life cycle. So look at it is calling here component did mount after calling the renders here 2 times. And then component will unmount because component is reloaded again. Component did mount, render and did update this way. So by looking at the way you can figure out how many times a component is going to render. So this is the behavior it is showing to us. So is it clear here how the methods are working and how you can control the re-rendering and what other things can be written over here?
So sir, if you navigate to the link in the header, right, and then come back to this page, that's also considered as a refresh, sir.
So what are the things we have done in the life cycle where we are using these various methods? So the same thing we can done here with the help of hooks simply. So I'm adding here hooks dot JS. Let me use a React functional component, and it is about hooks. Then I'm using here H2 hooks. So here to keep the data, we having here use state. So use state where let's say I'm having a user data, or you can say user, and it is list here. Let's say set users. So by default it is empty array like this way. Then let me use here use the state by having a use effect. So let me use here use effect. So in the use effect, let me remove it. And here I can call the API. Same API I can call here simply. And now instead of using here this dot set state, I have to use a set users, then data. This way I can set it. So what are the things we have done here using the component did mount and the constructor? We have done like this way here. And now I can show here on the list. So I'm using here a loop. So here I can use the simple loop here. Let's say users dot map. I'm having here item slash index. And then I'm returning it a return li. And then we having the item dot login. And here I can define the key here. So it would be here key where I'm putting here index like this way. So this is a simplified way to do the things here. Now in the app.js, I can define the root. Here I can define the root here for hooks. So I'm using here hook this way. Now let me connect the hooks here. So here in header.js, I'm connecting the hooks. So in this way, we having the hooks. So now let me run the application here and npm start. So go to the hooks here. I'm getting the data like this way. Clear? Okay, now the thing is how we can create the form in React and how we can validate the user input. So React does not have the by default form validation support. If you will write the simple input controller here, this is the same thing we did before as well. But this simple one actually not helping us at all. It is fine to do the some basic operation, but is not recommended for doing the data validation. So in that case, we having here React form libraries. So we having the formic, we having the React hook form, we having the Redux form. So these three library will help us to create the form in React. So when it is coming the formic, so formic is the most popular open source library for the React and React Native, widely used to apply the validation. And in the React formic, we having the formic tag, form tag, field, and the error message to create the form and to apply the validation there. So formic only helping us to create the and handle the form input control, but is not helping us to apply the validation properly. So in that case, we having a form validation library that is a yup. So always you have to use the combination of formic, a yup, a React hook form and yup. So these two library combination we have to use to create the form in the React.js. So let's see how we can create the form here. So let me create here a one component with the name of form.js. And let me install here a package for the formic and yup, I'm installing here. Now let me create the form. So React functional component, and here I'm creating, let's say, user form. This way I'm using. This is my h2. And to create the form, we need to use a yup. So let me import here yup. So I'm using the library yup. So import asterisk as yup. Now let me create the form here. So here before creating the form, let me create a schema. And let me define the default value for the field. So I'm creating here a user object where I will define name as empty. I will define here email as empty. I will define here password as empty, confirm password as empty. I'm defining here terms as empty. This I'm defining it. Then I can define here the schema constant schema. I can define where I can use yup dot object, and here I can define the things there. So using the yup, I can create it. I'm using here name, then it is yup dot we having the string. Then I'm using here required and define the error message. Please enter name this way. Then we having for email. So here we will have please enter email. Then we having password. So same way we having password. Please enter password, confirm password, terms. So please enter password. Then we having confirm password. So this is my confirm password. So please enter confirm password. And here I will compare the value as well. Let me compare the value one off. And here I will define the yup reference. So I'm going to compare the value of this confirm password with the filled password. And if, then let me define here the message confirm password does not match. So here I can wrap it in double quotes so that it will work out simply. For terms, I'm using here, let's say Boolean. Please accept the terms. Please assume the terms. So this I'm using it. So I can define here user sign up, user sign up page. I'm using it simply. I can create here the formic tag now. Formic tag this way. Inside it, I can use the form tag this way. And in the formic, I can define the initial value. So initial value is here user. Then I can define here validation schema. The validation schema, it would be here a schema. Then let me define here on submit. On submit, we can have the values we will get here. This is a callback function where I will get the values after submitting the form. And what the value I will get, I can console it here. Values, I can console. So this is a setup actually we having for a schema. This is for defining the default value for all the input controls. And as per the formic, we have to use the formic tag. Here I'm defining the initial value for the all input controls, the schema which will use to validate the input control. And whenever I will submit the form, where it will submit the value, this is the function we having. This function also I can keep separately. If I'm willing to keep it separately, I can keep it like this way. So here I can have a function handle submit this way. And this handle submit I can mention here. It's up to you whether you are keeping there, whether you are keeping separately. I hope it makes sense now. So this is the way we are going to set up the formic. Clear to everyone? This form also I'm using form the formic. This one. It's not HTML form, it's a formic form tag. As we created yesterday composition, what we have done, we created our own input. I'm right? Input and button. Similarly, formic library having its own form. It's having its own field. It's having its own error message. Clear to everyone? So here I will define the value to. So I'm using here, let's say name. Then I'm using here field. In the field, I'm defining the name. Then I'm using here type. Type is text. Then class name. Class name we having form dash control. So this way I can create the text box. Okay. As we created yesterday input tag, similarly it's a field tag here. Let me use here error message. For error message, I'm using here component. How you're going to render it? I'm going to render it as a label. I'm adding here error message tag as a label. Then define the class name. So I want to render a class text danger. Then I'm using here for which I want to show the error message. I want to show the error message for name field here simply. So we having label, field, and the error message. Same we have to mention for email, password, confirm password. And this is for terms. And here I can use email. Email. Then we having here password. Then we having the confirm password, this one. So this is my confirm password here. And then we having the thumbs. So it is checkbox. And here I can mention accept thumbs. And it would be here a submit button. And for password, it should not be input type text. It should be here input type password. So this is my input type password, confirm password. And this is my checkbox. For checkbox, don't define the class, otherwise you will get a bigger text box, bigger checkbox. Now add a submit button. For submit, you don't need to use any one. Input type submit value would be here register. And then we having the class name btn dash primary. Simply this way it can come. And I can connect it with my header. So here I can connect it with form, and it also I'm having the form. So define here routing. So this is my form I'm using here. User form. This I imported. So user form is opening. Click here, I'm getting all the message. Can you see? So here you can enter password, isn't it? This way how the validation we have created using this one. So clear to everyone, this is the way how the form we can easily create and React with the help of formic library. Okay, that's fine here. So now the thing is, we have done all the fundamentals of the React.js, which are necessary to get started with project element.